All right, so what we talked about before is the key elements of a business model. And this is actually a fairly common exercise when there are lots of contending models. Then you start to make these pictures and say, okay, well, Chess Bro says this and Hamel says this. And together we create one abstract business model. That's actually what Osterwalder and Pinner did before they created the business model canvas. So that was part of his PhD thesis of Osterwalder. And now he's making a living out of it. So it's been, I think, a very profitable exercise, but also scientifically a very well-grounded exercise. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the complexities of business models. So here you can see, well, all the reasons why you would start redesigning your business model. So for instance, there's always convergence. Convergence is this concept where you talk about things that are starting to look more and more alike in industries that are growing more and more in the same direction. So, it used to be that banks were banks and software companies were software companies. But nowadays you see that a company like Exact is thinking, hey, should we get a banking license? At the same time, Rabobank is thinking, well, should we start developing our own ERP software? So you see that the banks and the software companies are converging. One of the biggest fears of most banks is that Google will come up with a banking license. They have a banking license, that they will come up with a banking product, and then what's left of it? I think in the Netherlands we also have some nice. We have Bunk, who are also trying to do make some waves in that industry. I'm very excited about these innovations, especially because I'm paying both ING and Rabobank basically just to be database owners. So they have my data, they have my name, they have a sum of money next to it, but that's all they're doing. They're not doing much more for me, and yet I'm paying hundreds of euros per year for this. So it's, I think there's some possibilities there. Well, regulation, of course, is also interesting. If I started a legal marijuana business tomorrow, then, I have to contend with the regulation in the Netherlands, but maybe also in the States, where marijuana is legal now. In some states and in Canada. So it's quite interesting that it used to be that the Netherlands was the forerunner of this drug, selling this drug, and now all of a sudden we're looking at Canada and the US, who are taking away all our business. I think with a more liberal strategy, our country could have been the number one marijuana provider, medical marijuana, for instance. But we missed the boat on this one. I'm not a user myself, but I find it interesting that because of some kind of conservative way of looking at this part of the world, we are now lagging behind, even though we always used to be the most innovative party here. They say that it's going to be the next billion industry market, so I guess there's a lot to do there. You can also see new market opportunities, market dynamics that change. If I'm selling my product with 40% profit, then I think most of us know that won't last for long, because my competitor will start doing the same thing. And competitor will also show me that my business model will need to change. So I think some very interesting business models. Think, for instance, of power by the hour from Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce actually builds more aircraft engines than they build cars. And these aircraft engines, you don't buy them anymore because they're so darn expensive. But you pay them, you rent them by the hour. So this is how we fund most of our airplanes. Airplanes too are a very interesting model, because nowadays you don't, again, own an airplane, because an airplane can be 200-300 million. I put in 50,000 and my pension fund puts in 20 million, and together they own fleets of airplanes, which are then rented by the airlines. So you can really see that, I think that we don't really respect how important these business model innovations are for funding these huge, massive projects. And a project like, for instance, building a skyscraper in New York used to be a lot tougher. Whereas nowadays, with all kinds of crowdfunding or institutional funding, these projects, these mega projects, are becoming easier and easier. Think, for instance, about the luxury cruise market right now. One after another luxury boat is being churned out, and this is mostly funded by these public investors. So it's I think this model is, we really need to respect it. Think also of Tesla, which also receives a lot of funding from shareholders, but also from the American government. It's something that we're not talking about much, but the American government funded Tesla for about 500 million. So without asking for shares, which yeah, take that, Dutch government. We don't see you funding any businesses for 500 million. I find it yeah, very interesting to see. Let's see if anything else. Yeah, so rapid technological advancements. If I'm a phone developer of non-mobile phones, and all of a sudden the mobile phone comes up, yeah, I know my days are numbered. So I need to start thinking, okay, what will be my next business model with this? Interestingly enough, you can still buy these steady phone, house phones and business phones fairly cheaply. So there are still businesses trying to make money with this, but obviously this is a dying breed. Okay. So added value. So well, why do you want to even do this business modeling? Well, first you want to identify and understand important relationships in your company. So the interrelatedness of design choices versus okay, what am I good at with my company? How can I probably make money? What have I already been doing in the past? Of course, legacy is always a really important thing for companies. Also a bit of a problem because, yeah, as you can imagine, an old, not so innovative company at some point becomes overtaken by another company. So it's always interesting. Also facilitating innovation. So how can money be earned with a new technology? This is always a good question. Right now, right above this office, there's a team of master students who are working on a startup called Brain, Brand Intelligence. And Brain is trying to do real-time brand recognition in videos. So right now, if I show a little brand, here you see Philips, then they are trying to recognize it in real time. And yeah, we love the innovation, but we have no idea how to get money out of this. So currently they're thinking about this right above my head, how they can actually make money from this innovation and who potential customers would be. And then there's risk-free experimentation. So the great thing is about, you can start drawing your business models and really start comparing these scenarios to say, okay, well, we can ask our customers 500 euros for a phone, but we can also rent it out for 20 cents per hour and see how that model works. And then you start, drawing all the loops and seeing where the phones will go and what if a phone breaks down and start thinking about all these scenarios. And then eventually you figure out, hey, this is a good business model or not. So this is a good way of looking at the world to facilitate your own company's development. So there's different views on the business model. There's the, of course, the revenue model. How much money can I make with this business? Also the transaction model. So what is the role of the company in the network of business transactions? I was raised by two entrepreneurs, Dutch entrepreneurs. So you can imagine I was born and raised in Rotterdam. So what did we do? Logistics, wholesale, those kinds of things. So I was always around that, and I was always looking at, okay, how much money can you make? How much money do you lose? What happens if you fill in a zero too many? Those kinds of things. And then, of course, value creation. So how can value be created by combining components purchased from suppliers, processing these, and selling the result to customers? So, of course, I can, buy an iPhone and then sell it on to you and make a couple of tens of euros from it. But of course, if I take an iPhone and load it with some very advanced metal detection software, I can all of a sudden sell it to people who are interested in metal detection. So all of a sudden, I have a very targeted group, and I can say, the 500 euros I spent for the phone plus the 500 euros of the components that I added to it. So I want you to pay 1,000 or even 1,100 for this. It's a high price, but people who like metal detectors are probably a little bit more specific. So you can also ask for a higher price. So designing a business model, this lovely little Giphy from Sjaak shows it nicely. It's sort of a balancing act. So you have the strategic interests of your company and also the other companies that are having their own strategic interests. And then, there's users, technical, organizational, and financial requirements that are all playing into your business model. And it's really sort of, okay, what can we do? What's the best way? Earlier I talked about Amazon having these servers over Christmas that they needed, but then on the 1st of January they weren't doing anything anymore. So on the 1st of January somebody else could use them and even use the CPU time for some tough calculations that didn't have to happen in real time, and they could sell that time quite cheaply. But then on the 7th of January, when everybody's back from skiing, then people need to actually do their work again, and then they also start using the server space for a little bit more money. So these things are constantly evolving, and you can have auctions for this. So say if you need CPU time, you can buy it at auction. But you can also have CPU by the hour, which is currently one of the most popular models. So, case of personal navigation. I think most of you have seen navigation devices. Right now, TomTom is going through some heavy weather, which is quite interesting. It's one of our Dutch pearls. So the question is, okay, can we be proud of them, or right now should we be a little bit ashamed of them? So here you can see the whole value chain. So you see the software provider, could be TomTom, navigation device producer, could be Apple, could be Android, Google, or Android device producer. The retailer, so you can go buy a TomTom device at MediaMarkt or a phone at MediaMarkt. And then finally it comes to the customer, i.e. There's also device manufacturers and of course the map providers, so the geography information system providers. So here you can see the whole value chain, and some of you may know that TomTom at some point bought TeleAtlas just to have access to the maps, and Apple bought their own. Maybe they bought TeleAtlas, I don't remember, but they all needed their own maps. Google created its own database, so they actually drove through the streets, as you may know. So you can see it's really very interesting how complex these value chains become. It fits very well with my earlier sort of description of how the world is changing, that we're all more and more connected, and competition is becoming more and more of a multi-channel competition. If you have one product, well, your product better be damn good, because your innovation can be taken over by a Chinese company within weeks, if not days. So that's something you always need to be thinking about. So these value chains are a nice way of looking at the world. And earlier you've probably seen the software supply networks. Today we'll also discuss them a little bit. So it should give you a nice idea. So here you can see a value chain model. Here you can see, well, there's a firm value chain that has several things that cost money. So administration, human resources, technology, procurement. That's your company. But also there's some revenue coming hopefully in on this side. Money going out on this side for your suppliers and your suppliers. And eventually, this all goes back to your customers again. So this is a nice way of looking at the world, that you're just a little a link in the chain of suppliers. And typically you see that you can be very high up the chain if you're providing an open source component or a PDF viewing component. And then if you go all the way down to the customers, then that's a special kind of business. I myself am like B2B a lot more than B2C because I'm afraid of customers. Actual end users are very critical, they pay very little money and they have lots of complaints. Whereas in the B2B market, you see that even if you deliver your product quite shitty, then you can still work on getting better quality and improve your relationship with the firm. Of course, if you ruin it with one customer, then your reputation is also ruined. But these are, I think, very interesting choices. Am I a B2B, business to business company, or am I B2C, business to consumer company? By the way, for the software industry, this is of course really relevant. So Google is a B2C company, or is it? Because they're selling ads to companies. But maybe bol.com is a better example. Bol.com is obviously B2C. Whereas, they're an Alibaba company, for instance, used to be a lot more about B2B. Nowadays, it's all over the place. So here you can see a nice value web. So you see your suppliers, your indirect suppliers, your alliances, and your customers. And on the inside of your company, well, you have all these things all these IT systems that support you. You can also see here that there's some external IT systems, marketplaces, extranets, supply chain management systems. And that's pretty cool because these systems are becoming more and more sort of publicly available, and they're outside of the boundaries of your own little cell that is your company. So I think this picture shows that well. Well, synergies. So of course there's, like I said before, part of your strategy. So some companies are super successful because they have these synergies. Think, for instance, that Google is worried about content and supplying you with the right content. So at some point they bought YouTube, trying to get synergy with another company, and they know that synergy fits well in their business model. Of course, video search is very far from what we know right now. Google's of course extracting all the audio from the spoken audio and trying to turn it into text to facilitate the searching. But this is still a nice challenge for Google, I think. So overall, I think yeah, these synergies are sometimes companies buy each other, and it really you have to think about it for a while. I thought when Microsoft bought LinkedIn and GitHub, or GitLab, no, GitHub. These were two companies where I really didn't expect them to be bought, because especially GitHub needs to stay sort of independent, and maybe the same is true for LinkedIn. So yeah, these are businesses where yeah, I find it quite interesting to see what happens in these companies, and why they make particular decisions. Yeah, so these synergies are of course really important. So core competencies, you of course also have to stay aware of what you're good at. I know that I'm good as an academic, which means I'm not a great coder, so I should be spending most of my time as an academic. You yourself need to define what it is that you will be good at, and what you will be, yeah, where you will be a world-class leader. So if you're going to be a programmer, try and be the best programmer there is. If you're going to be a student, try and be the best student there is. That's a little bit up to you, of course, but yeah, competition can be important. Yeah, so these are your core competencies. So what's the core competency of Google, for instance? Well, search. What's the core competency in selling ads? Maybe that's even more. What is it for Utrecht University? Innovation. We are one of the prime organizations delivering Nobel Prize winners, I think 9 or 10 at this point. So you can see that we're doing very well at this. And that's our core competence. So if now somebody says, well, should we also have an internal lease plan for cars, for electric self-driving cars? Yeah, then I hope that the university management sort of frowns its eyebrows and says, probably not the best idea right now. We should be focusing on innovation and collaborating with other organizations to create new patents and stuff. That's our core competence. Well, then finally, traditional economics versus network economics. So traditional economics are very sort of logical, that if I build a machine for 10,000 euros and then I optimize it for 1,000, then I can keep costs decreasing. So I spend another 1,000. So let's say on the first 1,000 euros, I decrease my costs by 50%. Great, lovely return. Then I spend another 1,000 and I see it only decreases by 10%. Obviously, because I already took all the low-hanging fruits, and I'm going to have to look for harder things to optimize. And the more money I spend, yeah, the more diminishing my returns are. Also interesting, network economics are sort of a different way of looking at it, and that's actually that the value of a network keeps increasing with the number of participants. So think, for instance, about WhatsApp. When WhatsApp only had 10% of civilians using it, then WhatsApp was nice, but it wasn't great. But now WhatsApp has a penetration of, well, for the people watching this video, I think 100%. So WhatsApp really grew in value there. So for me, WhatsApp became way more valuable when all you guys joined, because now I can communicate with you. Same for Slack, for instance. If only half the group will join Slack this year, then yeah, we're in trouble. But if all of you join, yeah, then it's peak value. So this is, I think, something that's very interesting about the modern economy, that this network economics is really essential. All right, now we get back to the definition. So I think I'll break here for a little bit, and then we will continue later with the business model canvas. Well, no. Let me first finish this. So where is the business model in the company? So here you can see all the externals, so social environment, legal environment, competitive forces, customer demand, technological change. And you see at the very heart the business model, and the strategy and the organization and ICT are sort of around it. Obviously, you could see Osterwalder and Pineur are information scientists, so they give ICT a very large role. I think nowadays ICT is sort of going further and further back. Because ICT, yeah, it's horrible to say. I know you are all not hoping that this will happen, but it's becoming more and more plumbing, and it's becoming less and less about the actual ICT and more about, okay, can we implement an application that can do really smart artificial intelligence type techniques for us, so we can predict our customer behavior, for instance. Yeah, and that's something that you guys also need to start thinking about. Okay, do I want to be a plumber? Or do I want to be at the more at the edge? Or do I want to be an implementer of AI technology? I'm not trying to tell you stop doing information science right away, but I am telling you keep your eyes open for the next big thing, the next big opportunities. Yeah, so a little bit more about value chains yeah, so here you see for instance the internet value chain. Here you can see all the things that play a part in it. So you see for instance media rights, user-generated content, some enabling technology, connectivity, user interfaces. So this can tell you exactly where your business could be in the internet value chain. So you see for instance Google will be there at search, Netflix will be in entertainment, your banking service will be a transaction, or your Bitcoin buying service, your Bittrex, for instance. And then this is also a nice way of looking at the world. This is more the stack view, which will also ring familiar for you if you're thinking about software supply networks and the product deployment context. And here you can see, okay, what does the stack look like? So you have your core IP at the bottom, you have your equipment a little bit higher, then your content and services, and then at the very top, the people consuming all these services. So for instance, e-learning or games, or here it's stated in lovely Italian, I think, musica, video, contenuti, I'm guessing that's content. So you can see that there's yeah, some really interesting ways of modeling these models. And I get the feeling that these stack models are actually quite, how shall I put it, these stack models are actually quite foundational for how we're going to view innovation in the years to come. So you see that these things are more and more sort of stackified. So something like Skype used to be something at the very top of the web and something that we all really cared about. But now Skype is something that when I make a phone call to somebody, I have no idea how it's being done. It could be using Skype even. It's becoming less and less interesting. Because also there are so many competitors and who cares. The same thing I think will happen to WhatsApp and Telegram. At some point you'll have one messaging client again. That will just be your inbox or whatever you call it. Because right now I don't know how it is for you, but I have my LinkedIn inbox, I have my Gmail inbox, I have my WhatsApp, which is another inbox, I have Telegram. So yeah, we're all over the place. Facebook, which I barely read. I feel very bad. Sorry, friends and girlfriend. My girlfriend uses it a lot. Okay. All right, so after this we will talk a little bit more about oh no, here we also talk a little bit about the process. Sorry, I keep thinking it's over, but so here you see the sort of the 4 steps in business modeling. So first you have a sort of service or hypothetical service you want to offer. Then you create a value web for it, as I showed before. Then you populate the value web, and then you further elaborate, looking at service, technology, organization, and finance. And this is sort of a way of modeling your value chain or your business model scenario. In a minute, we will actually do this in the business model canvas. You'll see all the common examples of Nespresso and stuff like that. Yeah, all right, so now we'll take a small break, also with some questions. And if you are very happy with, show you my face larger. So if you're happy with all this, then great. The business model canvas is following. There will also be some questions about it, and if you think you already know everything about the business model canvas, then yeah, just do the test and see if you know it, and if you do know it, then move on with your life, I would say, and go on to the next section. All right, thank you up to here, and if you're stopping now, have a nice day. I will not be stopping, I will be continuing my recording. Thank you.